You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey Doctorow,
Brandon Sanders,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is...
Thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Happy Halloween, everyone. It is, we are recording this on the Friday before Halloween, and this is going to be our Halloween Spooktacular podcast, and I couldn't think of anyone better to share the Spooktacular hosting duties with me than the one and only Richard Gleaves, the author and the creator of the Jasonverse. And if you listen to the show, you have heard audiobook clips from Richard's Jasonverse series, starting with Rise, Headless, and Ride, and then Bridget Bones, General of the Dead, and then starting the second trilogy, Book 4, Salem, Blood to Drink, and there's more coming. And if you are a subscriber to Richard's Patreon, you know all about that, and you have the inside scoop there. But Richard's going to fill us in on what's going on with Jason Crane and all of his buddies. Welcome back to the show, Richard.
Thanks, Hank. It's good to be back, and I'm glad to see the podcast has grown and grown and grown, and it's really become a great thing for you.
Absolutely. It's we're in our 8th year now, if you can believe that. It still kind of surprises me when I think about it.
I was episode 19.
You have serious bragging rights, don't you?
Distinction. And now this is our second Halloween episode, I think. We need to get some spooky music in here.
Right. For sure. Are you a Spotify user or Apple Music? Do you participate in any of the subscription music services?
No, I guess I'm an old fart.
I was just thinking we need to come up with a playlist that we could share with people that as they're listening to any of the Jason books, some mood music to go with it. That would be fun.
My favorite Halloween song is from the old Disney cartoon, Huey, Dewey, and Louie singing "Trick or Treat, Trick or Treat, Trick or Treat." It gets me in the mood every year.
I hear you. Well, speaking of getting in the mood, let's recap for folks that may not have been around for episode 19. And what is it about Halloween and this time of year in particular that means so much to you?
Well, you think about being a kid. There's a special time, I don't know, maybe between 5 and 13, maybe up to your teenage years, when Halloween is an extraordinary thing. Because, we don't know at that age how it all started, but somehow the adults let us dress up like we're all actors suddenly, and we're all spooky, and we get to pretend to be all the things that scare us. And we get candy, It's an extraordinary time of childhood. And as an adult, I found that I had lost it. Every year, October 31st came around, and I was doing nothing. And I was like, I'm not even watching Friday the 13th anymore. I'm not doing anything. And so I was in my 40s, and I was living in New York, and I said, this year, I am going to get myself in gear and go up to Sleepy Hollow, New York, and just immerse myself in that Halloween mood. Because Halloween really kind of started up there. The Dutch and their pumpkins and the New England autumn spooky mood and stuff. And I fell back in love with Halloween in a way that I never dreamed I would. And it's been 7 years now of Halloween madness, but I still love it. It is a way to rekindle that childhood dancing in the street in a tattered sheet kind of mood. It's
Well, you bring up a great point, Richard, that that Halloween sort of it came from Sleepy Hollow. It seemed to emerge there, and we know that anyone who's done any armchair scholarship on Halloween, there are links back to the Celts and a holiday called Samhain, and you can make all sorts of tentative connections to that. But Halloween, as we know it now, is very much an American thing, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, it was some kind of chaos night for everyone to let off some steam. But the association with ghosts and witches. I mean, here I am. I'm living in Salem now, and there was a real fear of witches still back there in the early days of America. But you get to Washington Irving. And this is about the time, 1821, where Mary Shelley is writing Frankenstein, and we are starting to get this fascination with the Gothic, the Gothic story of the vampire, the witch, the monster starts coming into us from Europe, I guess, from about this point. But here in America, we had a man of letters, which was rare in the colonies, a true author. And Washington Irving, of course, he wrote Sleepy Hollow while he was in London, but he was writing about a particular time and place that he grew up in, late colonial America, when we still had a very heavy Dutch populace north of New York after it had been New Amsterdam, with all kinds of spooky beliefs from the old country and unusual habits. And they were really superstitious, the Dutch, and he loved their ghost stories. And when he created the legend of Sleepy Hollow, he injected into the culture a very specific idea of autumn ghostliness. Halloween wasn't really a thing yet. It was just kind of peeking around the corner. The legend of Sleepy Hollow is about that. You talk about candy in Halloween. In autumn in Westchester, you'd be talking about the harvest. You'd be talking about bringing in the best crops and filling up that cornucopia. And so you have Ichabod, who is just an eater, a great devourer in front of him. And you have the fall scenery and the spooky glens, and then that magnificent ghost, which is actually kind of German, the headless hunter, the headless horseman of Sleepy Hollow. And once that got into the popular imagination, and then stories of elves and little people in the mountains when you get into Rip Van Winkle, that is something that grew into Edgar Allan Poe and Telltale Heart and all our love of spookiness. And then 20th century, you say, hey, it's a great thing for the candy manufacturers and the manufacturers, and you get the machines going and you start spitting out your masks. And I don't think that's a bad thing any more than I think Christmas should be less commercial. I love lights and trees and Halloween candy and Reese's Pieces, but Halloween has become this carnival too. It's a spooky carnival. And
So speaking of our connection with the spooky, for 364 days of the year, we avoid things that make us feel uncomfortable as much as we possibly can, and then this one day a year, we allow ourselves to connect in an interesting way with the things that scare us. And when I was a kid, I was a very frightful kid. I was afraid of everything. I remember after watching my very first horror movie that some friends talked me into, taking a shower and washing my hair turned backwards in the shower so that I could keep my eyes open while I rinsed the soap out of my hair because I was so afraid someone was going to come and stab me in the shower like I'd seen in the movie. But then, and I purposefully avoided things that scared me. But then as I've gotten older, I appreciate more and I connect more with stories that face those dark parts of life that we don't want to think about. What do you think the role of Halloween societally is?
Well, first of all, speak for yourself, because I live in Salem and we do Halloween for 30 days.
Well, I'm talking about the rest of the country. You guys, accepted.
First, and never ends. And believe me, you have to, if you're a resident, you have to stock up on because you're not going anywhere. When I think of Halloween, I guess I am more in love with the spooky. I've never been a big slasher movie fan or horror fan either. I mean, Psycho is a year-round scare. I mean, just any time that you get involved with some lunatic or whatever. I mean, we can be in the middle of June and hear about some monster, some serial killer, some human being. And I'm not a particular fan of that kind of genre of murderous, creature. So I don't like the Final Destination movies or anything like that. For me, Halloween has always been about what you don't see, the possibilities that the universe may offer for magic and strangeness, and the bizarre the old gods and the risen pumpkin. I mean, the great pumpkin, Charlie. But Halloween is more kind of metaphysical to me. That sense of, is there magic in the world or not? And I'm a rational guy those other days of the year, but you get to Halloween and you want that one night of pretend that you can wave your Harry Potter wand and make strange things happen. And that to me is so different from the idea of being terrified or scared. And the two going together, I mean, that starts with the slasher movies in the 70s. You think about Halloween, the film, and there's a new one, out now. But Halloween, the film, is about what you don't see. It's about suspense. It's still a good spooky movie. But then right after, they say, hey, Halloween made a lot of money. Let's do Friday the 13th and we'll have a lot of gushing blood and stuff. So there's two kinds of Halloween to me. And I've always loved, and in my books, I've always emphasized the long walk in the cemetery, the going down into the creepy tomb, the kind of Scooby-Doo-ness of it all. I really enjoy that. Of course, there's a lot of beheading and headless horsemen's and stuff in my books. I mean, gore is good when you want a jump scare, but you can't have jump scares every 5 seconds or else they lose their effectiveness.
Dabble is a proud sponsor of Author Stories. Dabble is an easy-to-use cloud-based writing tool that gives writers a way to organize, plot, and create amazing stories wherever they are. Write in our desktop app on your Mac or Windows computer, tablet, or mobile device. Dabble syncs your latest version with the cloud on all your devices. Write anywhere and anytime inspiration strikes. We got you. Dabble is my preferred writing tool, and I think it will be yours as well. Visit dabblewriter.com for your free trial. You have an amazing story idea. You execute the writing and editing flawlessly, and now the only thing missing are readers. We can help you go from author to author superhero with Story Origin. Story Origin is a one-stop shop for marketing tools with a community of amazing authors working together to find reviewers, build mailing lists, increase sales, and collect feedback from beta readers. Everything an author needs, all in one place, from providing review copies or beta copies, reader magnets to ensure you stay connected with readers, easily distribute audio promo codes, universal retail links to send readers directly to the proper point of purchase, or provide direct download links for members of your mailing list. Story Origin has all the tools you need in one easy-to-use site. Use the promo code ASP21 at checkout when subscribing to the yearly plan, and you will get 10% off your first year. This code will expire December 31st, so hurry over and subscribe now. StoryOriginApp.com.
Well, and one thing that we've learned about storytelling is that you're absolutely right. You can't just keep people's adrenaline pegged. If we're talking about a movie for an hour and a half or 2 hours, if we're talking about a great book, you can't keep people's adrenaline pegged for 2 weeks, as someone casually reads a novel. You need to let them off the hook, so to speak, at times. And then that makes the jump scares and those types of things more effective when you allow for that full emotional range, doesn't it?
Yeah. When I am not a huge fan of the Sleepy Hollow TV series because they started the first episode with a risen headless horseman with bandoliers of weapons shooting off machine guns and killing cops. I mean, that was where you started.
So we just started over the top.
Yeah. For me, when I started writing the Jason books, I was more interested in that kind of Ray Bradbury storytelling, that sense of autumnal wonder. And I wanted to recapture what I loved about the legend of Sleepy Hollow itself. And so you look at the first Jason book, there's very little supernatural in it. The first book, you have, for readers who don't know anything about the series, I wanted to recreate the legend of Sleepy Hollow in modern day. I mean, that's been done before, but what I wanted to do was do it as Washington Irving did. I wanted to write about the real place. And so I steeped myself in the actual Sleepy Hollow in Westchester County. And so there's a lot of world building of kind of Halloween town tourism in the first book. And the question, is there a horseman? Isn't there a horseman? Only gets answered at the end when he rises in spectacular fashion and we have our first chase and we're off to the races. And then that gives you somewhere to go. You've established characters first before you've established the dilemma, the monster, the creature. I mean, we don't care about any of those kids in Friday the 13th. I mean, we barely meet them. They're barely sketched out. It's all about, what has the prosthetic company got in store for us? But, having somewhere to go is a wonderful thing for an author, especially if you're going to write a series, because then in the second book, you can heighten the stakes. You can start having the murders. You can start having the disasters and things and the near misses. But you do it with established characters that you care about. And so the headless horseman, the demon, the witch, the monster, they are catalysts in your story, not the whole point of it. And I think that's the difference. You're still writing a drama, as I see it. You're still writing character sketches of a psychopath. You're still writing the relationships of kids of a certain age who have to negotiate the world, coming of age stories. You're still writing everything that you would write in a normal novel with no ghosts, but you're adding on the layers of mood of spooky, and then you have an over-the-top scene now and then with swinging hatchets and rolling heads, and it's wonderful to have all those layers to play with. But you don't have any layers to play with if you just get right to the horseman shooting off machine guns. I mean,
right.
What do? episode 2, the Horseman has a nuke now. The headless horseman with a suitcase bomb in the middle of downtown Boston, and Jack Bauer's got 24 hours to stop the headless horseman. You do not have anywhere to go after that.
Headless horsemen's with dirty bombs. Just it doesn't have a good ring to it.
No, it's disassociated from what we love about the original, which even the original is not really about a headless horseman. It's about a rivalry of 3 characters, of Brom and Ichabod and Katrina, and who's going to win her hand. And then the Horseman episode at the end is the climax, and even that is left open. Was it just Brom? Is it just a character who cleverly got rid of a rival? I mean, there's no specific saying, yes, there is a monster in Washington Irving's original, but we want there to be a monster.
Right.
Once he started Halloween and that mood, now we want to at least have the ghost that one night of the year that rides and rises.
Richard, when you and I first met, Rise, Headless, and Ride had been out. Bridge of Bones had been out. And if I remember right, I think it was right around the time that you published General of the Dead. And you were living and working in New York and then making numerous trips up to Sleepy Hollow as you kind of channeled the feeling of and the atmosphere of what you were writing, and you really wanted to connect with the Washington Irvingness of the original story and the original Jasonverse trilogy. When you started book 4, Blood to Drink, you moved to Salem, and I remember talking to you around the time you were going to do that, and you weren't exactly sure, how long you would be there. You just felt compelled to do it, and it kind of seems now that you're a citizen of Salem. What did going to Salem do for you in writing the next part of this ongoing story, and how does being connected to that place open up the new possibilities as the story continues?
Well, I didn't know how long I was going to be up here. I figured the first 3 books took 3 years to write, and it was cheaper to just come up here for research instead of fortunately, I had remote work at that time too. But I think the pandemic kept me here longer than I expected because, just everything has changed in the past couple of years. And, talk about spooky. But when I got up to Salem, it was originally because it was such a long drive from New York up here, and I wanted to do the same thing I had done with Sleepy Hollow for Salem, and peel back those layers. I mean, you start off with a town known for its spookiness, but 21st century, you're talking about a McDonald's and a Walgreens on this corner, and things that we take for granted as just kind of prosaic life, and it takes work now to find that colonial Terrytown, that Ichabod's Woods. It takes work now to peel back the layers to see the site where the hysterical girls started pointing fingers at the local women. It takes work to find out where the courthouse was. We just don't have this kind of history in front of us daily, as our ancestors did. So when you want to write spooky about a real place, it's tough. I think that's why we have so many horror stories, because it's easier to project one of our neighbors in our world going kookaburd and grabbing a butcher knife. It's just easier to see because that's what's in front of us. We don't see that kind of superstition. We don't see that kind of devotion to legends. Our legends now are the Incredible Hulk and Iron Man. We have so many legends about place, about local sites. So I came up here and I was surprised. One thing that does happen to you as a resident is you get used to a place in that prosaic way, which sometimes I have to fight, because when you're in a place as a tourist, you're more interested in, oh, that's the place where the sailors used to be shanghaied down to the pier, given to the pirates. That's something you do as a tourist. When you live in a place, you're like, darn, that's the place where I got shortchanged on that burrito. Becomes a different thing when you live someplace. And I love Salem. I'm glad I was in Salem when New York got so dangerous for a while, from the pandemic, and who knows what might have happened. Fortunately, being a writer, you're kind of housebound as it is. So not interacting with a lot of people. But I, as I told you, Salem being a tourist town, we closed down, and that's bad for research when you're here to see the parades and
Right.
the craziness. But I do love the town. I have fallen in love with Salem. I didn't think that I would, because it's so strange. It is a town where people hanged their neighbors in a fit of superstition, and now hundreds of years later, it is a carnival with, as I say, Harry Potter stores and fried Oreos. I mean, they right now we have a carousel on the common. We have the food trucks lined up all around the Central Park, selling everything from empanadas to fried Oreos. I mean, we've got the Witch Museum with crowds of people in front of it. We're deep into haunted happenings. We have witches giving tours in our woods, showing how to cultivate wild mushrooms. We have, the Satanic Temple doing a high tea every afternoon. They are sponsoring the Salem Horror Fest as a fundraiser for abortion clinics in Texas. It is a strange place when you try to associate it with the story that began us as the Witch City. There's a vast disconnect. A strange cultural thing has happened in this little corner of New England. So it's a year-round Halloween town, and a town of Wiccans and wand shops. It's a very strange place to me.
So with the first trilogy being centered around the original Washington Irving story, and then when you shift to Salem in book 4, how does the story, what happens in the story that allows you to jump locations and to move the kind of the underlying story that you're exploring to a new place, a new time, new authors? I guess what I'm asking is, as Jason kind of revisits these times and places in his unique way, what can we expect from the rest of the series? Like when you've accomplished what you want to in Salem, where do we go from there?
Well, the most important thing for planning a series is the planning, is laying the seeds of where you want to go very early. Because, I mean, if you write a Sleepy Hollow trilogy, you have the risen headless horseman, you have the ghosts, the complications, and you have the resolution. And then where do you go? But very early, I decided that I wanted Jason Crane to be ongoing. And I wanted to explore specifically in my mind 3 locations: Sleepy Hollow, Salem, and then I wanted to get into the works of Edgar Allan Poe. And that seemed like an escalation to me from one ghost to witches to a sense of a broader And almost we will get into a little bit of slasher movie territory in the Poe books, because there's so many things like the Pit and the Pendulum and that kind of scare. So it gives you some place to go. And in the planning stage, I decided a couple of things that would be key as I went to stories like The House of the Seven Gables in Salem. So I looked at Hawthorne, and Hawthorne is all about a stolen fortune, and it's a bit of a treasure hunt, and what's hidden in the house. And there are two warring families, the Pynchons and the Mauls. And so in book one of the Jason Crane series, yes, he's a descendant of Ichabod, but at the reading of a will, we also find out that he's inherited a vast fortune. And we find out that his middle name is Pynchon. And we have already established one of the other characters named Valerie Maule. And so that's in the background of the first trilogy. As you're looking at it, you may not notice it. There's also the love interest of Jason is Kate Usher. So giving us a place to go in the Poe books.
Right.
So then by the second book, Valerie is revealed to be a witch. We start getting the sense of prophecies of the Usher family. By the third book, we've wrapped up the Sleepy Hollow story, and you have to set up the move. So Kate's father is a politician running in Boston as a carpetbagger. And so when he wins, he becomes a senator. He is now Massachusetts bound, taking his daughter with him. And since she's the love interest of my hero, that gets my hero up to Boston. And it means his friends come along to have a fun summer in Salem. And it means that the people that work for Paul Usher are now bringing their kids into the story, and more characters get moved. And so the planning stage is really vital. You can't make it up as you go along. You have to say, okay, I'm gonna face this technical challenge here in a few years if I keep going. And so I want to give myself that hat trick of like, oh, look, suddenly, completely logically and without any kind of forcing, I have moved 10-person core cast to Salem to deal with new stuff. And then you get into where did Jason's fortune come from? And it turns out that it came from the story of the House of the Seven Gables, and it puts him in conflict with the Mauls, who are the coven that rules Salem, and it puts him in conflict with his friend Valerie, who's now on the opposing side of an old Hatfield and McCoy kind of feud. And so from here we get into the witch trial stuff relating to 1692, but what are the implications in my world? One of the things that's important in writing a series is to have some kind of overarching magic system that you're developing. And for me, I discovered what I call the Great Curse, which is a simple rule that if any normal person discovers someone with a magical ability, they are cut out of the world to keep the knowledge spreading. So the ghosts are activated, they take down that person, and through the attack, they are either killed and the knowledge eradicated, or that person is elevated to be one of the gifted themselves. And having that as a larger conceit of the series, of an exiled race of supernatural beings that stay hidden for our sake, that solves for me the questions of, why doesn't Harry Potter go and use his powers on the New York Stock Exchange? Like, why are wizards hidden? You have to have some kind of reason. So for Jason, we have the rail laid down in advance for the story to keep moving. And I know where it's going for Poe as well.
So, from a logistical standpoint, the deeper you dig into these American legends and works of literature, and then the farther you move this the story that you're working on that deeply connects to those, but moves to create a new legend of its own. How do you manage all of the information, the historical information that you have to get right, and you have to constantly lay clues that will be revealed in later books and later down the journey? How do you manage all of that? Have you devised some system that allows you to quickly reference pieces of information that you've pulled from or that you've written into the series? How do you manage that?
Well, I admit that I am lazy enough that I don't have a series Bible. I literally do hold all the details in my head, and I don't make outside references, because when you're writing, you have to stay in the moment, and there is no stopping in the middle of a scene and saying, okay, what did I set up again? Where are those notes? And half an hour later, you found out that Kate's eyes are blue and that she likes and like, oh yeah, she likes hot chocolate. Okay, where was I in the scene? And suddenly you are out of the moment. So I see the usefulness of book Bibles, particularly when you're involved in genealogies and what year were people born in and that sort of thing. But I prefer to keep it in my head and just keep complete immersion when I'm in the story. I listen to my audiobooks a lot for that. I love my audiobooks. Michael Sommer was a find. He is a glorious narrator. I can't say enough wonderful things about him.
He elevated already great books to legendary status with the audiobooks, that no doubt.
Yeah, it's just marvelous. And he, I think of him as a collaborator, and I like to challenge him and throw crazy stuff at him. But listening to the audiobooks constantly keeps things in my head. And there are a lot of elements going on in the Jason series. You have the kids in the present and their relationships and their particular characters and all their contexts. You have to keep in mind, one thing I don't like in series fiction is that things don't continue as they would in real life. If Jason gets a scar from the headless horseman's hatchet, he's going to be looking at that scar for the rest of his life. I mean, that's something that comes up. In later books, he passes a mirror and he notices his hatchet neck and remembers that adventure. And that's something that I find that's missing in a lot of series fiction, is just saying, okay, we're going to have to take every thread that's going on and treat it as it's done in real life. And so, one kid is still holding the guilt of his murderous father, and one kid is dealing with a new marriage of his parents. And just not to gloss over anything. It's easy to say, okay, we're writing the Salem books now, so everything that happened in Sleepy Hollow, just forget it, we're rebooting. No, not for me. I want to write a complete series that's real, but there's a lot that you have to hold in your head. You have to see everybody as if you've known them, as if you've met them, as if you were there and you saw the whole thing happen. And if you see the whole thing happen as an author, you're like, oh yeah, the horseman was wearing red spurs that day, or he was, he threw the axe and hit the tree at the particular spot. If you've seen it, then you don't have to remember it, because you've also lived it. And hopefully your readers have lived it too. So you can throw out references to things that they saw vividly and clearly, and you don't have to remind them. And that is, for me, the task of an author, is to present a recreation of reality in the kind of vividness that is as if it actually happened to you. And if you can do that for a reader, you also do it for yourself, and you don't need a lot of reference.
Fantastic. Richard, something that you and I have touched on in the past, but I don't know that I've ever asked you directly or in this way. You grew up in the South, Texas and Florida, I believe, where you spent a lot of time. Now you live in the Northeast and are writing books, that deal with the legends that began there. How do you feel about yourself as a native Southerner living in the Northeast and telling these sorts of stories? Or is that something that ever crosses your mind?
Something that, when I on the phone with family and they go, in a deep Republican state, why are you living in that hellhole? I moved to New York because I originally aspired to write for Broadway. And so I wrote a musical of the Picture of Dorian Gray when I was 23. And it was done at Goodspeed Opera in Connecticut. And so the professional options were up here. I still love Texas. I still miss growing up on the beach in Florida. But I was a fan of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Halloween, even when, if I looked out the window, I'd see a jacuzzi and a beach, palm tree. Be in my house with my record player on, listening to Thurl Ravencroft sing the Headless Horseman song. So I've always loved spooky. And after I was in New York, there was that period of reconnecting to that element of childhood. And that's what took me to Sleepy Hollow and New England, was that throwing that pipeline back to that childhood imagination. And that brought me here. I don't really see a disconnect between being a Southerner and being a New Englander. I mean, we're a connected society now. I talk to my friends in Texas as if they live next door, and my friends in LA and anywhere else. But it does bring a certain sensibility to my writing. I wouldn't say that I'm, any particular political stripe. I'm more libertarian than anything, but there is a certain, sense of Southern values that comes into my work, I think, in certain ways. And that just creates something different from the next person on the bookstore shelf. There's a combination. There's an alchemy where you bring in where you grew up and who your favorite grandparents were, and the things that you remember from childhood, and you combine them with suddenly you're in New England, and you get a particular gumbo of life experiences that makes a taste that hopefully other people will read. But in order to be different, sometimes you have to pick somebody up and transplant them in some place that they never expected they'd be. Pick up somebody from Alabama and drop them in Tokyo, and then you have a novel that somebody has probably never seen before. And I like to think that I've brought something new to the New England mood that maybe out of being a kid in those places.
For sure. Richard, a while back you launched a Patreon account to take the future of the Jasonverse, as you call it there, into the future, and to keep a full head of steam going there. And you're doing some really unique things with the Patreon page. What was the decision process like to launch this, and tell us about how book book 5 is coming along, and what you're doing with that's so unique.
Well, Patreon is, for those that don't know, is a website where readers can support their authors and also get extras and things that they wouldn't get just from the books. And also, to have material that comes in between books, which is important if you're a fan and you're curious and you want to get excited about things. So Patreon is first a way for me to give to fans of the book, material between stories and to give them updates on where the series is going. So that's how I approach it. I never sell fans. I don't think you should. If someone's a fan of your book and they're willing to talk about it, and those are the people that you give things to. But so it took me a long time to decide to do a Patreon, but practical necessity. As I say, I moved to Salem and then COVID came along and suddenly there was no place to pick up extra work when you needed it. Everything was closed. And so Patreon becomes vital, particularly now, particularly in 2021. You have authors all over the country that are in trouble, and as independent authors, they're not going to be getting unemployment. They're not going to be getting any kind of support. Some of these programs that step in, they just don't consider being an author an essential service. So I encourage everyone, not just my Patreon, because Lord knows I need the cash, because I can't, as I did in New York, go work for Morgan Stanley in the middle of the week and write on weekends. As I say, there's nothing within distance of me but Harry Potter stores and stuff now. So I would encourage everybody to think about the writers that you love as people that they're not all super powerful with Netflix series. I mean,
Right.
Netflix series of the Jason books set in Sleepy Hollow with a few good effects and legitimate history. I would love it, and I need something to too, so that would be great. But not just my Patreon, which incidentally is Richard Gleaves at Patreon. But everybody, if you love somebody's work, consider that if you're flush right now, they might not be, and reach out to them and support them, and at least for now, because it's an important time to support your creatives as well, or else you might not have them when this is done. And so everybody, I really encourage you to do that.
And so for your supporters on Patreon, you're doing something really unique with the writing of book 5. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how this experience is different for you.
Yeah, I'm trying to throw chapters to readers as I write them. So it's kind of like getting back to Dickens and the Pickwick Papers. It's what's your weekly installment or your bi-weekly installment, depending on how good I'm doing. But give your readers some chapters, talk about the process behind, because I think people like to read your journals, they like to read your notes. I mean, it depends on whether your fans are rabid enough for it, but you have to even the things that you think no one was going to be interested in. Today the trees first changed orange in Salem. People want to know if they love your work. And I've tried to do little 10-minute featurettes, because fortunately the work that I did was video editing and animation. So using those skill sets, I can take footage of Sleepy Hollow and demonstrate the relationship of the book to the real town, or tell stories about how it was written, or some of the things that we're talking about now. So there's a lot of content you can add on your Patreon that may not be traditional author content. I mean, you can do merchandise and that sort of stuff too. But it is vitally important, particularly now, to just get some monthly support to your artists who still have rent to pay, who still have bills, and who are working in an industry. And we all know that, particularly in self-publishing, it can be feast or famine. And for a lot of people, it's famine out there. So again, I harp on it, but love your writers, look out for your writers, do for your writers in real world terms. Because when you buy a book that you love, maybe you pay $10, $5, $15, whatever it is on Amazon, that's a one-time purchase. Right. That does not feed your writer for the rest of the year he's writing. And so I hate to think of it as charity, and I tell writers, don't treat it as charity. It is a venue to give your best fans more material, and for your best fans to show you that they are your best fans.
100%. And for anyone interested, there's a link to Richard's Patreon in the show notes of this episode. Go click it today. Go sign up and be part of this. This new form of world building is one way to look at it. When you give us those glimpses behind the scenes of what's going on, it really can add to the experience of enjoying the books when you get these interesting views behind things.
It's a way to get your cut chapters read as well. Fill your darlings, but then put them on Patreon.
Right, exactly. So, Richard, what do you think in book 5? Where's your head, at this part of the process, and where are you taking us in the next book?
House of the Seven Gables does not have a really iconic monster the way The Legend of Sleepy Hollow does. So I had a great ghost in book 4. And now we're more or less into the history of the witch trials. So for the rest of the Salem arc, there isn't that kind of literary link that I like. I thought about, the Scarlet Letter or something like that. But we're getting mostly into an alternate history of the witch trials. Now, in my story, there is a spell on the original witch judges that was supposed to be a curse upon them, that they die 1,000 deaths. But as a result, they are endlessly resurrected, and so have become people of extreme power on the international scale. These men that we think of as these cruel torturers now find themselves in the place of CEOs of great financial firms or embedded in politics and that sort of stuff. So now I have a risen witch from 1692 with revenge in mind. And we start internationalizing the story at this point as she begins to kick out the pillars of these large structures that constitute the appointed, who are the people who watch out for the world to make sure it's not cursed, to make sure that some witch or some magical person is not caught on film, leading to ghost attacks against everyone that believes in them, because it could be an apocalypse if that happened globally. And by the time we get to Poe, and we're talking about the rise of the Red Death and the plague in the streets and everything, this will be an international story. So it grows from one kid and his grandma in a little rural cemetery in Sleepy Hollow to a story that will be a global, I guess, for one of another term, a global supernatural pandemic going on by the end of it. And my hero, dead center, eventually we're saving the world.
I love it.
to it. It's just going to be the biggest writing challenge because, again, I have to think about what it would be in the real world to have ghosts rising from everywhere, from Père Lachaise in Paris to Arlington National Cemetery to the ghosts of the Indian reservations, all rising at once to take on the world. I can't wait.
And neither can we. I know you have scores of rabid fans waiting for the next book to come out and to see where you will take us next on this epic journey. The Jasonverse is available in Kindle edition or paperbacks if you want to hold the book in your hand, or like me, have a shelf that you. I'm sorry.
The audiobooks are my favorite.
And I was getting to that, and my Audible library has all four of the Jason Crane books, and this time of year we crank them back up and listen, and my whole family loves the series, and that's something I've been able to share with my kids and my wife, and we love it. It's a great series for all ages, and that's one thing that I really love about it. They're all four are available now. You can go grab them. Book 5, any idea, Richard, when we'll see book 5 for publication?
Hopefully next Halloween. It's been delayed by all the craziness in the world.
Of course.
And it's hard to do research when the shops and stuff are closed, but it's coming. It's coming. It's well on its way.
Well, we have plenty to keep us busy until then. Richard, we're going to put links to your Patreon in the show notes of this episode. Is that the best place for people to link up with you and get connected with all that you're doing?
I think so. Also, keep you up to date at Facebook at the Jason Crane series.
Great. We'll link that as well. Richard, always fun chatting and catching up. Congratulations on all that you've done, and we look forward to what's coming up in the future.
And congratulations on the success of Author Stories to you, too.
Now stay tuned for an audiobook excerpt from Richard Gleaves, the Jason Crane series.
Midnight struck. The Sandman had come. A few faint notes drifted through the rooms of 417 Gorybrook. The hollow wind testing the weatherproofing, the weak scritch of the persimmon tree against Zeph's window, and the drone of Hedwig's snoring. The old house shifted, creaked, and the shade of Agatha Van Brunt descended from the attic. "Brom?" she called. The ghost paused, collecting herself on the stair. She passed a mirror, but the glass remained empty, reflecting only absence. Agatha would not have recognized herself anyway. She had been beautiful long ago, and still was in her own mind. Not a toothless and wizened spectre. Not a blue chalk sketch of a hag half erased from the blackboard of night. She drifted into the master bedroom, disappeared into a shaft of moonbeams, and reappeared on the other side. She stood over Hedwig, listening to him snore. But Hedwig was not Brom. She needed Brom. She slipped through the floor into Zeph's bedroom. She stood over him for a long time, listening to the persimmon tree's weak coffin scratch on the window screen. Brom? No, this was not Brom. Not Brom, her son. But she loved this boy. So much hidden potential. He reminded her of Dylan, her grandson. Dylan had slept in this room many, many times. But Dylan was dead, never to return. This boy, Zeph, was alive. So alive. Oh, would that he might remain so forever. Look at him. Who would consign such a handsome lad to the rot of death? Only a very cruel and blind God. Agatha brushed her spectral lips to Zeph's cheek. He stirred, scratched the spot, and rolled into his pillow. But Zeph was not Brom. Where? Oh, Brom is dead. She remembered now. Brom is dead, and so are Hermanus, my husband, and Hans, my brother, and old Baltus Van Tassel, and Katrina, all dead. Only old Agatha remains, after a fashion, to trouble the world. Her sense of herself sharpened and returned to her. She searched the rooms for the Crane boy. She sensed him. Yes, here was the boy, sleeping fitfully, holding his animal. She extended a hand as if to reach into Jason's chest and take his heart in her talons. The dog woke, sensing Agatha's presence, and growled. "Growl till your voice cracks, cur. I could kill this child myself. I could possess the man or the boy. I could take the butcher knife from the drawer. I could stride through the night in strong male form and dissect this child at my whim." Something struck her. Something blasted her up and away from the boy. She collected her energies again and tried to re-enter, but could not pass through the walls. When she found her voice, it came as hollow and cold as wind through a tomb. "Who is here?" Agatha whispered, and her tone might have withered grass. "Show yourself." She waited with growing confusion and anxiety. She threw herself forward and battered the door like a tempest. "Who is here?" she cried. But no one answered.